Unit 11, page 4 notes. How do materials get recycled in an ecosystem? Do now. What kinds of materials do you think might get recycled in an ecosystem? Pause the video here and write your response. Press play when you're ready to check your answer. There are three main materials that need to be recycled in order for an ecosystem to remain stable or balanced. Namely water, which remember are made of elements hydrogen and oxygen, so water is a compound. Carbon, which is going to be an element, but is going to exist in several forms, namely carbon dioxide or CO2. And nitrogen, which is also going to be an element, but exists in many different compound forms. Let's start with the water cycle. This should be a review from Earth Science. The water cycle is the movement of water between oceans, atmosphere, land, and living things, known as the water cycle. During evaporation, the sun's heat or radiation is going to cause the water to change from liquid to vapor form. In the process of condensation in the atmosphere, the water is going to cool and return to the liquid state. Precipitation, remember, is when that falls to the earth. Then we're going to have runoff, which allows that water to go into lakes, streams, and oceans. The water falls from the atmosphere to the land and the ocean is called precipitation. Rain, snow, sleet, and hail are all forms of precipitation. Most precipitation actually falls into the ocean. The precipitation that falls on land and flows into streams, rivers, and lakes is called runoff. Groundwater is precipitation that seeps into the ground and is stored between or within rocks. Groundwater flows back into the soil, streams, rivers, and oceans. Which is why it's important not to pollute the ground, because the groundwater can then become polluted. And again, taking a look here at a diagram of the water cycle. You should be familiar with all parts of the water cycle, as well as transpiration, which is water being evaporated from plants. Remember, this is controlled underneath the leaf. There's a special type of cells called the guard cells at the stomate that's going to open and close to control transpiration. Without water, there'd be no life on Earth. All organisms from bacteria to animals and plants are composed mostly of water. Water helps nutrients and waste within an organism be transported. Water also helps to regulate your temperature. And all water taken in by an organism is eventually returned to the environment. This is why we call it, again, the water cycle. The carbon cycle. So again, carbon is an element. So besides water, the most common molecules in living things are organic molecules or molecules that contain carbon. Remember, there are three main organic or carbon molecules: proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids are our three main carbon compounds. DNA or nucleic acids are also considered carbon compounds. The exchange between carbon and the environment and living things is known as the carbon cycle. Photosynthesis and respiration. So during photosynthesis, plants are going to use the carbon in the form of carbon dioxide in the air, and they're going to use 6 carbon dioxide molecules. They're going to rearrange them to make a 6-carbon sugar known as glucose. So all sugar came from carbon dioxide. So it's that same carbon molecule that's now been rearranged. Most animals get the carbon and energy they need by eating plants. So again, photosynthesis is the start of this carbon cycle. Plants and animals break down these sugar molecules, which again contain that carbon that originally came from carbon dioxide, and they do that in a process known as respiration, which releases energy. Respiration is going to use oxygen, and it's going to re-release that carbon dioxide that was originally used to make the sugar, is now being released in the process of respiration. Decomposition and combustion. So it's the breakdown of substances into smaller molecules is called decomposition. For example, when fungi and bacteria decompose organic matter, carbon dioxide and water are returned to the environment as these things are rotting or breaking down. Combustion is the process of burning a substance. So we're thinking about wood burning or fossil fuels in a car. This is combustion of organic matter. Also is going to release carbon, typically in the form of carbon dioxide. So if we look here, we see how the carbon dioxide in the air is going to be converted into sugar at photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, again, makes those sugars. Plants and animals then use that sugar in the process of respiration to make energy and re-release the carbon dioxide into the air. But they also release carbon dioxide into the air when they're decomposing. So when the bodies are rotting, they're re-releasing the carbon dioxide into the air. And when we're burning things, we're also releasing that carbon dioxide into the air. So as you can see, the only thing that's pulling that carbon dioxide out of the air are the plants. So the carbon dioxide is only being pulled out by photosynthesis in this particular diagram. The nitrogen cycle. Living things need nitrogen to build proteins and DNA. The movement of nitrogen between the environment and living things is called the nitrogen cycle. Now, converting nitrogen gas. So although 78% of the Earth's atmosphere around us is actually nitrogen gas, most organisms, including ourselves, cannot use nitrogen gas directly. We have to rely on the bacteria that are in the soil that are able to convert nitrogen gas, which is just in the form of N2, into forms that plants can use. This process is called nitrogen fixation, and it's essential to most life on Earth. Other organisms get their nitrogen by eating plants or animals that eat the plants. So we get our nitrogen not from the air, but by eating plants that have absorbed the nitrogen from the bacteria in the soil, or animals that ate those same plants. Passing it on. When an organism dies, decomposers break down the remains. Decomposition also releases a form of nitrogen into the soil that plants can use. Certain types of bacteria in the soil also are going to convert the nitrogen into a gas to return it to the atmosphere. So if we look here, we'll see the nitrogen in the air, which most organisms can't use. So lightning and nitrogen fixation bacteria are going to put it into the soil, and then plants are going to take that converted nitrogen into their cells. So if we eat plants or even animals that eat those plants, we're getting nitrogen for our bodies. But when things die, certain bacteria are going to release that nitrogen into the soil, whereas others are going to convert it into gas so that it again goes back into the air. Okay, we're going to take a look now at a quick film strip.
Kingdom getting your way all the time.
There's more?
Simba. Everything you see exists together in a delicate balance. As king, you need to understand that balance and respect all the creatures, from the crawling ant to the leaping antelope.
Dad, don't we eat the antelope?
Yes, Simba, but let me explain. When we die, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass. And so, we are all connected in the great circle of life.
In this audio clip of The Lion King, explain how organisms are dependent on one another and dependent on materials cycling. Make sure that you highlight how bacteria are involved in this cycle.